the hell did you find out in this extensive reporting with Seth Wickersham about the John Gruden emails? What would you say?
I would tell you that the John Gruden email leaks that occurred in October of 2021, that there was a large cast of characters, far greater cast of characters than was previously known, who were responsible for that leaking. It starts with Dan Snyder and Dan Snyder's law firm, Roc Nation, Jay-Z's group, a woman named Desiree Perez, we were told. People believe that she was involved in the leaking, as well as the NFL league office and Roger Goodell. We have people pointing fingers at all of those people. But the real takeaway, Pablo, is the fact that this began with Dan Snyder trying to ingratiate himself with Roger Goodell, trying to end a punishment that was very light to begin with, and in basically green-lighting these leaks against Gruden, it triggered a chain of events that led to to Snyder being forced to sell the team.
Right. So the John Gruden emails, to recap briefly, this was the story that came out in the Wall Street Journal, October 2021, a blockbuster. When John Gruden was working for Monday Night Football, he had sent these emails in an exchange with Bruce Allen, then the GM of the Washington football team, in which he called DeMaurice Smith, the NFLPA executive director, DeMaurice. He used a racist trope to describe DeMaurice Smith, a black man, and all of it felt like a matter of time until he was ousted. Of course he was, but you're now saying, Don, that there is a murder mystery, so to speak, around who leaked the emails, but Dan Snyder. Explain how Dan Snyder is squarely a suspect.
Well, he's always been the main suspect, Pablo. In fact, the story we did last October for ESPN, we all but said that the league office was certain that he was the person responsible for the leaking. But after doing a lot more digging, it turns out, as I said, there's many more people that had access to these emails and had motives to leak them. And one of the very interesting people that we found out and we were told was involved in the leaking is that email you just referred to, the first email that was leaked, that Gruden wrote this racist email about DeMaurice Smith, the NFLPA executive director. We were told by a source who Smith spoke to directly that Smith bragged that he was the one responsible for leaking that to the Wall Street Journal. Now, I should say that DeMaurice Smith declined to speak with us through a union spokesman. So there is a large cast of people that had access to the emails and had motives. And one of the really important things is the week of those leaks, there was a leak to the Wall Street Journal. There was then a leak 3 days later to the New York Times. Early that week, these emails went to Roger Goodell. They went to his desk. He reviewed them. And then in a matter of 48 to 72 hours, the leaks began.
Don, there was also a Roc Nation element to this, too, and people in Snyder's camp who may have been implicated in this. But is it possible that more than one person or persons could have leaked the emails because there are so many people with motives here?
Yes, that's very likely, if not absolutely true in what we discovered through the reporting. Roc Nation has a contract with the NFL to help on social justice messaging. It's a $25 million contract that was signed back in 2019. Desiree Perez is the CEO of Jay-Z's Roc Nation. Desiree Perez is also a member of the Commanders board and of directors, and she's very close to Dan and Tanya Snyder. So Perez is sort of the linchpin, according to sources that we have, both legal sources and league office sources, that kind of is the conduit, allegedly, to get the emails from Dan Snyder and his law firm. And by the way, the law firm is called Reed Smith. They're a New York law firm. They have clients, both Dan Snyder is a client, and so is Roc Nation. And so the emails go from Dan Snyder greenlighting them, Desiree Perez and Roc Nation allegedly being in the middle, to the league office. From the league office, they allegedly get to DeMaurice Smith with that first leak. I mean, it's a winding road. It's a complicated story. But we talked to nearly 36 people over the course of many months, and it's all laid out on ESPN.com.
But, Don, this is David Sampson talking. Are you suggesting, or do you think that but for these leaks that Snyder would be skating and he'd still be an owner and not be forced to sell. I think this all started because of the workplace culture, the sexual harassment. That's what got Dan Snyder eventually thrown out of the game.
There's no question about that, David. You're right. But by the fall of 2021, you have to remember that there was a punishment that the NFL put out in July of 2021 against Snyder that Goodell meted out very light punishment in hindsight. It was a $10 million fine that was leveled against the Commanders. And Snyder had this very hazy suspension, and I'm using air quotes around it. He really, he had basically a few months he had to stay away from the team. And as we report in our story, Snyder all but dictated the terms of his punishment, including offering suggestions for the press release that was released about the punishment. And then fast forward to the fall of 2021, he's antsy. He's anxious to get back, attend league meetings, be seen on the field before games. And Goodell at that point doesn't want any part of it. Now, why that occurred, I don't know. It's possible that owners thought the punishment was too light because he's not widely liked. But in any event, what happens is Snyder believes if he can actually find a way to get these emails out and give Goodell an opportunity to basically, and this is the language of our sources, take out Gruden. And Gruden is somebody who had a very difficult relationship with Goodell going back years. Then that's what motivated Snyder. We have reporting, David, that shows very clearly that after these leaks occurred, within a week, this congressional committee opened up an investigation of Snyder and the Commanders and the NFL. It led to new allegations of sexual misconduct against Snyder the following February. And we have many sources telling us if it wasn't for the leaks, there wouldn't have been a congressional investigation, and Snyder very likely would have skated.